I need to come clean about something. I was wrong about Forsaken. I know you're probably shocked to hear this, that comparing a game with multiple different characters, playstyles, pieces of tech, and abilities is more complex than a glorified mobile game from 2012. I knew I had to remake my original Forsaken review about 2 minutes after posting it, but I have to say, the amount of people saying that I didn't do my research, missed the entire point of the game, and made a terrible argument for why the gameplay was bad are all completely correct. Well, okay, maybe not completely correct, but more correct than not? It's complicated. Instead, let's just start from the top, forget that other video ever even happened, and actually talk about Forsaken for real this time. Forsaken is a survival strategy action game created by Soul Driven Love, a small dev team with a lot of testers. Taking a boatload of inspiration from Dead by Daylight, Forsaken aims to create a slasher movie with all of your favorite Robloxians from across the platform, as well as a sprinkle of new, original characters. Each round, one killer must face off against several survivors. The killer must kill every survivor to win the round, while the survivors must turn on generators in order to lower the time before the round ends. The ones who survive until the timer runs out win. It's a simple concept, but similar to games like Doors, simple concepts are often the easiest to mess up. So how does Forsaken fare? Well, if you asked me 3 months ago, I would have told you that Forsaken is a terribly balanced surface level game, but now after putting around 20 hours of total playtime in, I can confidently say that most of those claims are not true. Firstly, I want to mention that Forsaken has had one of the quickest rises to popularity I've ever seen on Roblox. It was like a bomb went off. And all of a sudden, Forsaken went from a niche indie title to one of the biggest games on the platform with one of the largest returning audiences. There's no bots here. This has, as you would expect, came with a gigantic amount of new fans, all wanting different things. And I have to commend the developers for sticking true to the game's original concept and overall vibe. This means that while a lot of things have changed in Forsaken, a lot has stayed the same. Firstly, balancing. Let's just get this out of the way now because I know it's still a hot topic. After having played more of the game, I do think that Forsaken is more balanced compared to when I first played it. I think the largest failure of that review was me not understanding that Forsaken, at its core, is a strategy game. Abilities have long cooldowns. Some are used to help the team, not yourself, and others still are two-time. I really hate two-time. The hard truth of having abilities in your game is that all of them need to be able to work independently from one another while still being compatible with other abilities. Take Elliot's pizza throw. If it were as simple as eat pizza to gain health, the game would suck. But Elliot's pizza throw is much more complex when you read between the lines. Firstly, the pizza's healing properties are modified based on how many generators you fixed, as well as how many other people are playing Elliot. This already introduces 2 layers of complexity to Elliot's playstyle. The more generators, the more pizza heals. However, it takes quite a long time before all the generators are fixed. So the question becomes, do you heal early to potentially save a teammate from the grasp of death, or do you wait until you can heal more later on in the game? This is already complicated enough, but depending on the team comp that you have, it's also important to take note of who you choose to heal. Characters like Shedletsky and Builderman have abilities that can heal themselves, Shedletsky with his chicken leg and Builderman's dispenser. But if you have characters like the newly added Dussaker who can provide a lot of direct support, as well as perhaps a second Elliot who both need healing, that's a much harder decision to make. This caused the gameplay of Forsaken to be a difficult mix of micro and macro management of things like team comps, ability timers, and objectives. And that's all just on a single ability on one character. Therefore, in that sense, Forsaken is more like a game of chess. Instead of kings and queens, pawns and knights, it's a gambling addict, former Roblox employee, engineer TF2, and two-time. What? Did I mention how much I hate two-time? But enough about the gameplay. Dude, what was that combo? As this video is starting to sound a bit too much like a League of Legends tutorial. Also, subscribe to the channel or else your brain will rot and come out of your ears. Let's instead talk about the actual characters in this game. I mentioned the Roblox mythos in my previous video, and I think that was a genuinely strong ad. However, there was a lot of stuff I missed. Firstly, and arguably most importantly, Cool Kid and 007 and 7. Now, the real Cool Kid and 007 and 7 are the same person. Cool Kid was, in fact, N7's alt, which he used to do most of the hacking for Team Cool Kid. In fact, Team Cool Kid was his whole thing, but to prevent his main from being termed along with any accounts he made, he kept the Cool Kid brand separate from 07. However, in the canon of Forsaken, 007 and 7 is Cool Kid's father. This not only opens up a huge amount of lore implications, but it's also led to genuinely shocking and tragic design choices within the game. For example, when Cool Kid kills any survivor, they naturally try to kick and thrash out of his grasp before Cool Kid snaps their neck. Delightful. I say every survivor, however, what I really mean is every survivor except 07. Like, Jesus, game, you really gotta add that? That's terrible. And the voice lines, oh my god, dude, don't, please.
It's so nice to see you, Dad.
There are more examples like this. More characters that are directly related to other characters in the game, like Two Time. God, I keep talking about Two Time, whom I mentioned in my video about the spawn symbol and his friend, an upcoming killer named Azure. But I must say that the choice to make 007 and 7 Cool Kid's dad, and to even go as far as having a dad skin in the game, is downright diabolical. Moving on, I've already mentioned a specific character, Elliot, and his insanely macro-focused gameplay, but I want to take a quick moment to talk about the other characters' kits. I didn't do this in the previous video. Why? I literally have no idea. So without further ado, here's the official Bedsheet Ghost Forsaken character tier list. Noob, probably my least played survivor and one of the more boring characters in the game. Noob is very item dependent, as they start out with the most items out of every character. A Bloxy Cola that gives a speed boost, a Ghost Burger that makes them invisible, and a Slate Skin Potion that allows them to tank quite a lot of damage. There isn't really much that I can say about Noob other than the fact that he can't drop any of his items because they're technically abilities. Because there are often things like medkits and cola lying around different maps, Noob is just kind of mid. C tier. 007 and 7. From one of my least played survivors to one of my most played, N7's gameplay is really fun, especially after the buffs. I can't tell you how many times I've successfully tricked the killer into running after my clone and not me. Being able to choose where it runs and swapping between different movement styles on the fly really sells the whole clone yourself and run away gameplay strat. Also, this teleport move is hilarious. B tier. Two Time. D tier. I mean, look, I know he's getting reworked, but still, no abilities and a mid-passive that ends up with you getting two-timed. Oh, see what I did there? More than actually being useful. Shedletsky. Look, I know Shedletsky is supposed to be a really good character for new players because his self-heal is like really good and has multiple charges, and that sword move is absolutely brutal if you land it. The problem is actually landing it. There are somewhat consistent ways to make it work, but I genuinely could not land a single good sword during my entire time playing this game. That being said, this skin is actually insanely hilarious. A tier. Guest, the better and more Giga Chad version of Shedletsky. Guest is definitely the most fun survivor to play, which is why most people play him, as he encourages you to really get up close and personal with the killer. Being able to essentially parry melee M1 attacks is so satisfying to pull off. And he has a dash? Fantastic. S tier. Chance. Never stop gambling. Oh, I've killed myself more times with Chance's gun than I've actually gotten it to stun the killer. B tier. Elliot. Please, for the love of God, eat the pizza. I mentioned how hard this character is in the opening of this video, but if you play him correctly, he's easily the best survivor in the entire game. A heal that adds a charge to a self-speed move? Sign me up. And he has an alien skin? Okay, that's S tier. Builderman. I'll be honest, I've played Builderman once, and I did not like him. His sentry really just kind of acts as a tool to piss off the killer by slowing them, so hugging the turret is typically a good move. As for the dispenser, if you place it off the beaten path, it's actually a great place for survivors to heal up while someone else distracts the killer. The problem is people finding the dispenser. B tier. Dusiker. I'm a little bit mixed on this guy. He's so new that I haven't really seen anybody use him well, and I'm including myself in that list. The shield is really good, but it leaves you super vulnerable when using it, and the same goes for his beam. It doesn't even stun like Chance's gun, it only slows. Also, if you whiff it, it's a guaranteed 2 hits from the killer easily. Jason, my most played killer tied with Cool Kid. Jason is a real sleeper pick at the time of writing this. He has wicked fast M1s that can absolutely cook people if they aren't paying attention. His Q is a disable, so it prevents characters like Guest from blocking you for a short time, and his E does an insane amount of damage. The only weird move that Jason has is his ult. It's a weird fast walk that reveals one survivor at a time and can be cancelled with a dash hit. It's an alright move, but not really one that I typically rely on. A tier. Cool Kid, the absolute best killer in the game still, even after several updates. Despite being the only killer with no ESP moves, unless you count his Q, which you then have to hit, Cool Kid manages to be the single most oppressive killer in the entire game. His lackeys mean that you can never really stay in one place for long, and his Q can go through anything. While John Doe may be a better chaser due to his passive and zoning capabilities, Cool Kid just does so much consistent damage. Walk speed override when landed is one of the most brutal moves in the entire game, doing a ridiculous amount of damage and setting your victim on fire.
Your humanoid property has no chance against mine.
S tier, most fun character in the whole game. John Doe, my least played killer out of the 4 currently available. He's a fine character, but it's just not for me. The Wall of Spikes is a fantastic move both as a utility for cutting off escape routes as well as an attack on fleeing survivors. Meanwhile, Digital Footprint is amazing for blocking off specific routes that are commonly taken by Survivor, like these bridges on the Haunted Mansion map. His passive gives him a speed boost after being stunned, which is fantastic for catching survivors, but I'm curious as to why you're punished for stunning him in the first place. Seems kind of strange. A tier. 1x4. Definitely the most unique killer in the game, with moves that are completely different compared to nearly every other character. He's the slowest killer out of the 4 even after the buffs, but that's not really important because 1x4 is the only true ranged killer in Forsaken. Before his buffs, he was easily the worst killer in the game. His moves were slow, with absurdly long windups and global telegraph sound effects. However, after his most recent buffs, 1x4 can do the single most amount of burst damage in the entire game. Despite that, he's still not really fun to play, so I'm gonna put him in B tier. So that's my thoughts on the current roster. Honestly, except for 2-time, every survivor and every killer, for the most part, feel fun to play. There are still balancing issues, sure, but those mostly come down to comp issues and unfun kit designs. However, there is one major glaring flaw that affects every single character in the game that makes Forsaken the absolute most frustrating game on all of Roblox, and that's the hitboxes. Forsaken's hitboxes are some of the most inconsistent hitboxes I have ever seen. Part of this issue is definitely Roblox's servers doing this game absolutely zero favors, but like, come on, man. I cannot tell you how many times I've swung my whatever at somebody and they just don't take damage. And in a game where managing stamina is so important, yeah, it's an absolute nightmare when it looks like you hit someone when in reality you didn't. I think the most egregious example of this is John Doe's hitboxes, because just like, perhaps this is what I meant in my original Forsaken video when I said that this game was unbalanced. Perhaps what I meant to say was that this game's hitboxes were unbalanced, which they are. Okay, maybe not unbalanced, but definitely inconsistent. I know that's probably a nitpick and completely redundant because who actually likes inconsistent hitboxes? But I can't make another Forsaken video without talking about it. The bottom line is that this game is fun, but it's frustrating. Despite that, I still think it's a fantastic concept. All of the cool things about the lore and characters still hold up from my previous video, and that's definitely one of this game's biggest X factors. And look, we all make mistakes, and I know that my original Forsaken video is pretty bad, but hopefully this time I did a better job. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.